details that I would like to share before we get started. The first one is I apologize. I do not have my camera on this morning, and that is really because of my weak internet service and my remote working environment. And I want to ensure that everyone is able to see the slides that I will be presenting this morning. So I apologize for that. The second item is that we will be recording this webinar from that standpoint to ensure that individuals that could not attend today's event will have the opportunity to review it, as well as each of you to have a resource that you can go back to. And then lastly, because of the amount of individuals that have registered for this webinar was well over 200, I really wanted to ensure that we kept this as a meeting event so that we could have more interaction. And so I know that you would have received some emails from my staff about trying to limit the number of people that are logging on within your Career Tech Planning District to 2, so that we can ensure that we can maintain this meeting approach and not have to switch to a live event.
Executive Director.
Our goal today is to talk through some information in regards to the Perkins 5 performance indicators that we have simulated some data for each CTPD. And the goal is to review the Perkins 5 data and accountability components, the context of the simulations, and then we were able to create some simulations for the CTPDs, our wonderful data manager, on technical skill attainment, work-based learning, as well as the 4- and 5-year graduation rate and the non-trad program enrollment. We will provide opportunity at the end of today's webinar for you guys to ask questions, but I will tell you that as we're going through the information, I want to be sure that we get through the information. But if you do have a question that comes up, feel free to put that into the chat function. I do have staff that are here that will be able to answer some of those questions as we go through in the chat component as well. So just to kind of refresh everyone's memory about, I know that it seems like it's probably been a while in terms of like thinking about our state plan from Perkins 5, just because of everything that you've had to go through on a daily basis, really, since a year from now with the COVID pandemic. But you know, our plan for Perkins 5 was approved last spring when we submitted it as part of the WIOA plan. And just as a refresher, that plan covers the program years of 2020 through 2023. And throughout the entire federal legislation, there's definitely a lot of equity focus, and we have several equity initiatives that we have built into our state plan as we've worked collaboratively with each and every one of you. And then just another friendly reminder that the data and accountability guidebook and the concentrator reporting matrix to help districts understand these changes has been posted on our website now for a while. And this is the page in which has those data and accountability resources. And so if you have not checked those out, I would highly recommend going to that page and bookmarking it from that standpoint, because a lot of the information I share here are contained in some of the resources on this particular page. So this table might at first become, maybe feels a little overwhelming from that standpoint, but I just wanted to ensure that everyone kind of saw like the big picture of our state determined performance levels that basically is part of our state approved plan. Something that was significantly different between Perkins 4 and Perkins 5 is that in Perkins 4, we did have performance indicators that we had to report to the US DOE on a yearly basis, but states had the ability to negotiate local targets year after year as part of that plan. In Perkins 5, the requirement was that when the states submitted their plan,
yep, I just got on.
They had to include their targets for this entire program year that the plan was provided. And so that is why you see FY20 to FY23 columns on this particular table is because we did have to submit all of that. And what we've tried to do, and again, this table is in our data and accountability guidebook and has been out there since last year, is that we've tried to show where the data is coming from. So for example, for our 4-year and 5-year graduation rates, we're using the graduation cohort, and we've identified for the FY20 year that the 4-year graduation rate is going to be the 2020 grad cohort. So this is a really good resource to have, I think, especially if you have staff that is working with looking at these performance indicators on a regular basis as part of their work, to have this table very easily accessible because again, when you look at some of our current measures, for example, the academics, that's a current year measure. So we're looking at the concentrators that are reported in the 2021 school year, as well as like non-trad enrollment is a current measure. And then technical skill is a current measure, which is different than what it was in Perkins 4. Work-based learning is a grad cohort measure. So we would be looking at the 2020 graduation cohort. And just to give you a little bit of refresher on this table, that the benchmarks for a lot of these measures were determined on some simulations, but the data and accountability work group worked together to come up with the targets for these different indicators from that standpoint, and then the growth over those 3 years. And just to kind of review the timeline for implementation of the Perkins 5 indicators, they will be part of the report card that will be published in 2021, in the September of 2021. It will be part of the November 21 quality program review in reference to the program quality elements as well as post-program. And then in December of 2021, that is when we'll be reporting our first set of full data on these Perkins 5 indicators to the US DOE. I will let you know that we are anticipating some type of communication from the US DOE's Office of Career and Adult Technical Education in the near future. We're not sure what that communication will include in terms of maybe the reporting for December of 2020, but we feel like we were in a national meeting yesterday where that office said that we will be getting communication. So potentially we might be getting a little bit of flexibility in December of 2021, but we do not know that at this point. So just to share the context of the simulations that has been created and why we've created these. The first thing is to allow for effective planning for the data. The data is not masked. And so for that reason, we will be sending the data to each CTPD lead through the Ohio Secure process. So make sure that next week is our goal in getting this data to each of the CTPDs, is that you're looking for an email from either myself or one of my program administrators, Patty Gooseman. And that email will contain basically a secure link to be able to access your CTPD level data. Because we are not masking the data, and the other component of this is that we are providing all of these simulations based on the Perkins 5 subgroups and special populations. It's important to remember that this data should not be shared with stakeholders outside of employees of your district from that standpoint. So really, it's important to ensure that this information stays secure. But we felt it was really important to get the unmasked data to each of you as a CTPD lead to really dive in and to kind of continue to build on the work that was done in the equity labs the last couple of weeks, where you begin to even dive into more data related to opportunities for growth when you start looking at performance across different subgroups and special populations. And so this CTPD simulation is just to provide another level of data to be able to continue to look at those data driven decisions that can be made that become an important part of the comprehensive local needs assessment, as well as the local application for planning on the career tech planning district level. The data reflected in each simulation is preliminary data, and it's subject to change. So this data is not what is going to potentially be on the report card. From that standpoint, each CTPD, as you know, in the past, you get reports prior to the report card that really is the final data for the report card. So this data could change, but we felt like it was important to get you some simulations, especially on these Perkins 5 indicators, so that you can look at where the performance is at this point. And then again, as I mentioned, and what our goal is in our agency and in our office is that based on the work that we're doing with equity, as well as a lot of the initiatives within our Perkins plan, that our goal is that when we do provide data moving forward, to really break it down by the student subgroup and special populations. And so in some cases, you know, some of your CTPDs might not have all of the subgroups and special populations, have individuals that are represented in those areas. And so if there is a cell that has no data related to one of these subgroups or special populations, that means that there were no students in that subgroup for this indicator. As I stated before, when you get your data Excel sheet, you will find that each of the indicators that we have simulated have it broken out by the Perkins 5 student subgroups and special populations. This is the expanded list of that. And you can see it aligns to ESSA from that standpoint. And again, we will continue to publish and provide data based on these student groups and special populations to continue to look at opportunities for growth when we start looking at performance among these groups. So as I mentioned before, we have, I think it's 6 simulations that we'll be providing you on, and 5 of them are federal indicators, and then 1 of them is for the state report card. The other thing I would like to share is that I'm not going in this presentation to get down into all of the methodology and calculation for each of these data simulations, but our data manager that does an outstanding job has put together a pretty thorough technical document that we'll be sending along with the data that really goes into the calculation, and the methodology behind the calculation. So as you are reviewing the data within the spreadsheet, it's really important to have that technical document alongside so that you can really begin to unpack the components of each of the calculation. So technical skill attainment passage in Perkins 5 switches from Perkins 4. Technical skill in Perkins 5 is a current year measure from that standpoint. And so we're really looking at the denominator is the number of career technical education concentrators under the Perkins 5 definition that were reported with participating in a technical assessment aligned to their program of concentration. And then the numerator would be those that would hit that proficiency level within that assessment. The one thing to remember in the simulation data that you're going to be looking at for this particular measure is it's going to be based on last school year, and that we had the alternative grade option for technical skill last school year. And so just keep that in mind as you're reviewing the data from that standpoint, because that is going to slightly impact, I think, where the technical skill component will be. And work-based learning and this is where we're providing 2 simulations from that standpoint, because in reality, work-based learning is a fairly new element that many of you are reporting on through the program reporting period. And so we wanted to kind of be able to provide from the federal side, our federal indicator data, which is basically based on the 4-year graduation cohort, and who are the students that are accumulating 250 or more hours of work-based learning. And then we also wanted to provide the state level indicator for work-based learning that shows up on the career and post-secondary readiness component of the CTPD report card, which that is based on the 4-year graduation cohort as well, but it's any work-based learning hours from that standpoint. So both of those data components are provided in the Excel sheet that we'll be sending out. In reference to the Perkins 5 indicator, and again, this is a new indicator in Perkins 5 with the program quality component that was agreed upon as we went through the Perkins 5 planning process in developing our state plan. And it really is the total number of career technical education concentrators under the Perkins 5 definition and the 4-year graduation cohort. And then the numerator would be the number of students that have reached that minimum hour requirement of 250 hours. The state report card indicator that work-based learning falls under the career and post-secondary readiness component. That is based on the total number of career education concentrators in the 4-year graduation cohort as the denominator. And the numerator is basically the number of career technical education concentrators in a 4-year grad cohort who has participated in some type of hour component of the state-defined work-based learning pieces. And when we talk about the state-defined work-based learning, this is, and these 6 boxes are probably hopefully familiar. We started rolling this out in the fall of 2019 in terms of the work that was done with the field and what do we look at in terms of work-based learning opportunities. And we have aligned that also with the new graduation requirements and those experiences. And you can find more information on these 6 different experiences in the CTE Data and Accountability Guidebook. But it's job site placement and internship. That's your typical internship that we think of when you hear the word internship. To apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs that have been approved through JFS, and then remote or virtual placement options. We know that COVID has probably made this even a more important component of being able to have students that can work within a remote or virtual environment. We also feel like entrepreneurship is really important. We have students that are really good entrepreneurs and creating their own businesses. And then school-based enterprises and simulated work environments. And again, more information can be found on our website on those 6 different types. The 4-year graduation rate, which is very similar to what we did in Perkins 4, from that standpoint is really the CTE concentrators and basically the FY20 4-year graduation cohort is the denominator, and the numerator is those concentrators who have graduated. I will just, this is another note on this particular indicator, that you still have a large population of your Perkins 4 concentrators that are being calculated in this 4-year graduation rate. It won't, next year's graduation 4-year rate will begin to have more of those Perkins 5 concentrators coming into that indicator. Same thing with 5-year graduation rate. And as we have seen in the past, our CTE folks do a tremendous job getting students graduated. And so again, the 5-year rate is all of the CTE concentrators in the FY19 5-year graduation cohort is the denominator. Then the numerator are the ones that have graduated. And again, the 4-year and the 5-year graduation cohorts, again, predominantly Perkins 4 concentrators. And in the past, historically, our graduation rates for Ohio with our CTE concentrators have been extremely high. And that's all because of the hard work that you do with these students on a regular basis. Our last simulation that will be in the Excel sheet that we send is the NonTrad program enrollment. And again, this is a current year measure as well, and where we're looking at the students that were in the current school year. And And the denominator is the number of career technical education concentrators that are enrolled in those programs with non-traditional designations. And the numerator would be looking specifically at their gender in those particular programs. And I will say that based on the information we've simulated up to this point, this indicator looks extremely strong in terms of meeting our state targets with it. So at this point, I would like to open it up for questions that you might have on the information that was shared. Again, what we wanted to do was just to lay a context to the information that we plan on sending out next week related to what to expect in the data files as well as the technical document. Any questions? It's really quiet. No one has any questions? I guess I could open it up that since we have some time, and I want to be thoughtful of, does anyone have any other questions related to anything as well?
Hey, Leah, this is Harry from Great Oaks, and we were just talking about non-trad. Is that wording going to go away, especially in the climate of today where gender is being questioned by all, by different entities?
So that's a really good question, Harry. And it's interesting. I had a conversation with Scott Stump last fall on some of the work that we're doing with civil rights and the non-trad indicator. And at this point, we're tied to what's in the law, and the law basically still points to non-trad. But our challenge is that the civil rights work and the work that Michelle Ward leads for our office really is pointing at some older rules that are still in place where events have to be inclusive of all subgroups, special populations, gender, and those type of things. And so I had an interesting conversation with Scott Stump because I was like, what's in the federal law doesn't align with what we're supposed to do with civil rights. And he said, I totally agree from that standpoint. And that at that point, they were going to try to continue to work with the civil rights folks on looking at how to get rules updated. But I think you bring something up that I would anticipate that there would be some movement to change down the road with that, Harry, because of what you just said.
Thanks, Leah.
Hey, Leah, this is Krista. Slightly related, slightly unrelated, working on the local application. Two things. One, do we have any idea when we might see our budgets for next year? And then also on the local application, it asks for a timeline, and it says it's an FY22 to 24 plan, but we have to do, I thought we had to do the local application each year. So when it's asking for timeline, we're not sure if we should be putting that it's an FY22 to 24 local application, or if it really is a one-year local application. Just wondered if you could clarify that.
So I'm going to ask John, can you take those questions?
Yeah, thank you very much. So let me start with the second one because I already forgot the first one. So the federal requirement is for you to consider the 4-year plan, which is the same as the state plan. So that term through June 30th, 2024. With that in mind, what we're saying is you can set 4-year goals. We're asking for strategies to be done on a 1-year basis in the fiscal year. So the FY22 application will fund FY22 activities. So it's kind of a blend of things. You're thinking over that longer time horizon, which is the same as the state plan, but you're doing a 1-year implementation plan, and you'll do another one next year, if that makes sense to you. And
So
Chris,
are we putting FY22 then only as a timeline, just a 1-year timeline in the local application?
no, so you can set your goals and strategies for multiple years, but you're only funding that first year. You're only funding the FY22 year. So in the application,
FY22 to 24 in that box.
FY22 would be July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022.
Right.
Yeah.
And our needs assessment goals, if we're copying and pasting, it's coming up because as we're copying and pasting from our needs assessment, the needs assessment was written like a 2-year needs assessment. So our goals are all written for FY22, which we wrote last year.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm copying and pasting my goals, they're FY22 goals,
Okay.
which just makes it feel like if I'm writing it now for next year, it feels like a 1-year goal. Just trying to make sure I'm not going to end up having to redo the whole thing.
Okay, so what we're saying is you can reconsider your goals. You're not stuck with last year's goals. You can reconsider them. You can extend the time frame, or you can keep the same ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Question.
And the second question was just, do we have any idea of a timeline on budget for FY22?
Yeah, so we do have individual allocations done in-house. We're trying to wait to coordinate sending them out with higher ed, and we're expecting it should be by the end of the month.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a question regarding the comprehensive local needs assessment.
Yeah.
So we completed that last year, and my understanding was it was completed for 2 years, and then we complete another CLNA for FY23. Is that correct, or is the CLNA we did last year through 24?
You're right. The CLNA is a 2-year plan, 2-year needs assessment, and then you do an annual application within that.
So that a year from now, we'll be working on the next CLNA.
That's exactly right. Yep.
John, can you add to that? This is Tawana, everyone. That you have a 4-year plan, and the CLNA is a biannual assessment process that you have to address on a biannual basis. And you can write goals over the 4-year period, but you're addressing the CLNA on an assessment process biannually. The strategies that you're writing to your local application that you're funding annually.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Tawana.
I just didn't want them to miss that 4-year period part.
Yeah.
Would it help if we maybe tried to put a 1-pager together that kind of like just shows like the different, we have like the plan, the local application, and the local needs assessment, and kind of how, because they kind of build on each other. There's kind of multiple time periods. Would that be of any assistance?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We
So
can do
John,
that. Yeah, we'll paste it to the CLNA website.
Yep.
That would be very, very helpful.
Okay.
we can do that.
Give us a couple days and it'll be up there.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, MJ.
Any other questions? So just as a, and I mean, I
have a
feel,
question.
yeah, Mary Jane.
Could you go back to your comments about the technical skill attainment when you said that we need to remember that last year some of our students did take the web exams and then some didn't, and we're using end of course grades?
So that was just when
You said, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that is on that simulation that when you look at it, it's last year's current measure. And to be honest with you, there are some students that took web exams early in the year in the fall, but we did allow that if if schools wanted to submit a grade for that test, even if they took it in the fall, that they had the option to submit grades really for all students in career technical education that were enrolled in courses last spring. And that
So
was
the
9 through
data-
12.
Will the data be reflective of those two categories?
The data is going to be, and Kelsey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the data is going to be taking the higher of the two assessment if both of them are reported. So in typical fashion, if the grade was higher than the test score, then the grade's going to be used. We don't have it differentiated out in the simulation.
Okay, thank you.
Kelsey, am I right on that?
You're correct, Leah.
Thank you.
And I know that this presentation, and we're talking about data and indicators and all that sounds very compliance oriented, and I apologize for that, but I just wanted to make sure that I felt it was good for us to talk about what we're sending you before you send it, and I had an understanding what the tech document was going to have in it and those type of things. And it's really just because in this transition from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5, we really haven't had to think about our performance targets that much in the last few years in relation to what we're doing on the local level with the CTPDs and what we've had to do with the US DOE at the state level. And so I just want to make sure, as part of the federal legislation, as a state, we are held to these state level targets. And then, as we're implementing this, the CTPDs will be held to the targets like we have been done in the past in the early days of Perkins 4 from that standpoint. And so not knowing what the US DOE is going to do with the data at this point that we have to submit in December of 2021, I just want to make sure that we're all we're looking at the data, we're trying to provide everything we can in case they don't give any type of flexibility. Any other questions? So the key is if you have questions, please reach out afterwards. We'll have a tech document coming with the Excel sheet that will contain the indicators that we shared from that standpoint. And that will be coming through the Ohio Secure process, and the email will come from myself or Patty Gooseman. And once you start diving into that data, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give any of my team members a call. I know that you guys have been working closely with John Beard and his staff in relation to the local application. I know that is due at the end of May, and we want to be here to help support and brainstorm and strategize with each and every one of you at the CTPD level as you think through the components of that local application, thinking about the state performance targets, and knowing that the years to come after this reporting cycle that we'll be negotiating local targets moving forward after this first year's process from that standpoint. So this is kind of new for all of us related to Perkins 5, and we I think we can all work collaboratively to kind of work through these pieces on the what I consider probably the heavy compliance side of Perkins 5 with these performance targets. Any other questions? Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful Friday. Hopefully it gets to be a little warmer than it was yesterday. I felt like it was back in a fall day yesterday, but hopefully it gets a little warmer and everyone can have a great weekend. And again, we're here. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out, and look forward to getting the opportunity to see you guys face to face at some point. It seems like it's been forever. I know from that, but have a great weekend.